My
Nathaniel Gillis. Going on, brother?
yes. It's going, brother. Just hanging out, doing research and trying to survive the weather we're having here in Ohio. It's not as bad as it was in Texas, but it's been hot lately.
Yeah. Yeah, we're in Illinois, so similar weather.
Mhm.
Um, Very unpredictable, you know.
Dude, you guys got the beard game going on strong. I can't,
Oh,
I'm
he
trying to
does.
grow it. He does, yeah.
It's
You
been a
got
while
some
since I
too,
touched it.
man. I am I'm a novice. I'm trying to emerge like a grandmaster in that art, but I got like patches of Houlihan. I got like a patch here and it's so hopefully, man. I mean, for some reason like a beard just makes you look much more intellectual in my perspective. So I'm looking forward to
Glasses too.
there we go. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So
How you guys do? What part of Chicago are you guys from? Or where you're at?
Tom, all right, well, he's more like South Side.
Okay.
And I grew up in it was like Berwyn, which is very close. There's Berwyn, Cicero, and then Chicago, but I like my later teenage years was spent in the suburbs further out
Okay.
west. So, and right now I'm pretty much in like the cornfields now with my family. You know,
All right,
get
cool, man.
distance myself from the city. But yeah, Tom's like South suburbs still, like Tinley,
Sound just
Orland
came
Park.
back for me. Anytime I try to plug in headphones now, for some reason, the sound will disappear. Like the past two episodes we recorded, I don't know. My
Hmm.
headphones are probably messed up or something.
It's probably when you plug it in, the audio probably just changes. It's probably just a setting, but it's not a big deal.
Oh no, now you can't hear you again, man. What the fuck? Hold on.
No, we can hear you.
I'm gonna turn on the captions. This sucks.
We can hear you. You can't hear us, I
Yeah,
guess. Okay.
I can hear it.
Either way. So you for folks that don't know, you are an author. You've written a couple of books. The Skin That Crawls, A Moment Called Man. You're a demonologist, a ufologist. Um, I listened to a lot of your podcast appearances I could find. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting, and I never heard a take like this, was you believe that both phenomenon are the same and kind of
Oh yeah.
somewhere down the line kind of adjusted to us kind of being aware of it. And I thought that was
Yep.
so interesting. So could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, so the phenomenon is evolving according to our awareness of it, and it is usually 3 or 4 steps ahead of us. And so by the time we take a breath, catch our breath for that matter, you start realizing what's been occurring, it adjusts. It makes uh, to a degree, it's not just evolving according to awareness of it, but it's evading us. And so the research I've been doing as of late is looking at the interconnectivities between like, demonology, ufology, and other phenomena in the paranormal, and watching it as it has leaned into and out of archetypes. So it's not just the alien, or I mean, literally, if it's something that was created within the mind of the population, or something was fabricated, even now, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, the phenomenon starts demonstrating that, manifesting that with experiencers. Very strange stuff. And so, the very first time I recognized that behavioral pattern was in my research regarding incubi, succubi cases where the phenomenon would step into roles and into archetypes in order to manipulate the experiencer. And these archetypes themselves were not always historically accurate. And that's when I realized, wait a minute, we're being gaslit. We're being manipulated by a species. And so I kind of took that concept and extrapolated that into a larger understanding of, it's possible that even demonology itself isn't complete. I'm pretty sure, at least from my perspective, that the extraterrestrial hypothesis is equally fraudulent, and that whatever this phenomenon is, in order to evade us, it has to evolve with us. And somewhere in that paradigm, there is the reflective nature of whatever this intelligence is.
That is that is honestly like the most interesting take that I've ever heard on the phenomenon. We'll just call it the phenomenon. I
Yep.
think that's really brilliant that you were able to kind of piece that together through your research.
Thank you,
Another
sir.
thing that I found was that I found really interesting. Your correct me if I'm wrong. Was your first experience was when you were 9 years old, and it was with a being, a pale girl that had dark
Yes.
hair under your bed that ended up being a shadow or a shadow person?
Right, right. And
Dude.
that case study alone, it showed me how it was mutating in its pathology. And so, like, yeah, I can go down that rabbit hole real quick for everybody, because I know there's going to be new listeners on your show that haven't heard it. But I moved into a new house, and it was close to 9. It was about 8.5. You call it 9, whatever. I always use a half because at that time and age it mattered, right? Like I'm 15.5, you know. Now looking back, I'm almost 36 next month. I'm like, doesn't matter at all. But yeah, so I moved into the house, but it was actually touring the house before my parents purchased it that I encountered that apparition. It was a little girl hiding underneath a bed. And at first blush, I didn't know where to place her. I thought, at least in my little mind, that she belonged to a neighbor and that she had snuck in. You know, the family was out to dinner. The only person there is the realtor. I'm thinking, you know, she got in through the back door and she didn't realize we were going to be there. I didn't know what to think, honestly. Um, but I couldn't place her. Once we actually moved into that neighborhood, I knew everybody, every family, and obviously being that young, you know how it is, man. Who's playing today, looking out there, looking outside for bicycles? Like, all right. Once I got to know the neighborhood, I realized this girl belonged to, like, she didn't belong to anybody. None of the families. She wasn't even somebody that actually lived there in the past. And I could have told you that after moving in experiencing what I encountered. I mean, it wasn't just a little girl. Like I said, it mutated in its pathology. Then it was shadow figures. Then it was what's called direct voice phenomenon, which is always occurring above your head. And I would wake up to full body, or not full body, but full blown conversations occurring above my head where I could hear seemingly two entities conversing. And it's the weirdest thing ever. And I thought I was alone until I got connected to a guy named Steve Mera, who was like, you know, he's a parapsychologist. He's like, no, man. He's like, this, we experienced this too. Um, but there was this parasitic and symbiotic relationship that this entity demonstrated. It wasn't merely a malevolent haunting. It was almost, I said this before, but it was almost projecting a fear on me and in monitoring my belief in it. Do I agree with the intrusive thoughts? And once I started to believe not just in the intrusive thought, but in the terror it was projecting, that's when it seemed to get stronger. And so I created a coping mechanism where I allowed myself to feel the fear coming from it without being afraid of it. So it was almost me allowing myself to have autonomy that kind of disavowed the phenomenon. I mean, literally, I winged it off and in a sense starved it. And before long, it just dissipated to nothing. But that was my very first encounter with this intelligence. And if anything, I learned that this entity was not various phenomena. It wasn't a ghost one day, right, and a demon the next. No, it was a singular intelligence that had worn both entities as masks. And that kind of spawned this idea in my mind that has since been validated by others in the field that what we are dealing with is a singular intelligence, and that in order to evolve and evade us, it has to don various incarnations and archetypes. That in that way, it kind of eludes us and forever existing in the dark corner where we'll never truly understand what it is, where it's coming from, and what its agenda consists of. We good?
Yeah, no, we're good. We're good. Man, so from that day forth, were
Yep.
you able to interact with the phenomenon, or were you more conscious or aware of it?
I was aware of it, absolutely. Another strange thing happened though when I first entered that room during the open house. You know, of course, I saw the full-bodied apparition, but there was a stench to it. And I'm looking around, there's nothing in the room. It was just a bed. That's it. So there wasn't like, anything decomposing. There was no rotting organic matter. There was just a bed. And yet I smelled something. And later on in my life, especially doing investigations, I realized that that was most likely either consciousness or that entity itself. And that what I was using to perceive it was not my nostrils. It was some kind of extrasensory way of interpreting that entity. And I've been on investigations where I've experienced that again, right? Some people consider it smells like sulfur. Some other demonologists say that it smells like a corpse. But that was another manifestation that really piqued my interest. And so later on in my research, I came across literature that it was about case studies in antiquity where early demonology consisted of that. Like they literally believed that the entity itself smelled like the body it came from. And so there was this sense of what's called corpse pollution. And that's, well, I don't want to picture on that, but that's essentially what I experienced, to my belief now, my knowledge now. But whatever we're dealing with, it's hyper evasive, and it will often implant archetypes within our consciousness and then use that as a mortal portal in which to manifest into. This is why, and I noticed this specifically with experiencers, that, like, for instance, one experiencer was abducted by Jesus, but the problem is it wasn't like the historical version of Jesus, right? No, he wasn't from the Levant. He was like the Swedish Presbyterian version of Jesus. And so what the phenomenon did, this is incredible, is it was almost like it took an image of Jesus in her mind and stepped into that mask and then began interfacing with her. And this is why it's so difficult for many experiencers to break away from the idea, okay, that's not who it's appearing to be. Why? Because it's constructing its mask out of archetypes that we have already believed in. And so this demonstrates a symbiotic relationship. And I don't want to ramble, man, so you can, I can just go on and on, but I won't.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, I'm having some audio issues. You guys are cutting in and out, but so what do you believe that the source entity would be then? You think that most phenomena then would be a single, malevolent intelligence then, just all over the place?
It can be malevolent when it wants to be. I've had cases where it turns symbiotic to parasitic, and this is interesting too. It quite literally takes all of the information about you that it gleaned during the symbiotic relationship, co-evolving with you, and then takes all of that information, weaponizes it when it wants to become parasitic. We've seen these case studies within succubi encounters, where when the phenomenon begins to interface again with the female, oftentimes it will mask as a husband, a lover, a deceased husband, all of the above. And the woman has no idea what this is, but it's trying to mimic. It's called parasitic mimicry. It's wanting that experiencer to believe I am who I appear to be. And somewhere within that paradigm, belief, it's almost like they're not just stepping into the role, but they're fulfilling that role to a T. And so whatever that image is, it somehow coordinates with what their agenda is. So, for instance, I had a case study in India where a lady was being visited by multiple entities, like for the last 3 years. And she's like, it usually comes at night, hovers over me, and it looks like an ex-boyfriend. But I said, okay, well, how many boyfriends has it manifested it as? She goes, well, everybody that I've been intimate with. She said, 7 men. I said, so do you think that these are all separate entities? She said, no. I believe it's one entity, but it's wearing various masks. And so when you get into the way it interfaces with these experiencers, it's not just deception, it's deception according to the agenda. And even within the one of the Gnostic texts, the Apocrypha of John, it talks about this very behavioral pathology where literally, okay, I'm interfacing with you, and I want you to believe I am who I appear to be. But at the moment of conception, literally impregnation. The phenomenon would take the mask off and the experiencer is left making eye contact with whatever that entity truly is. I had a case study about 3 months ago now, where the gentleman wanted me to come and cleanse the house. It's fascinating, but he said, okay, Nathaniel, he said, I want to explain my position. He's like, I don't believe in spirits. I don't believe in any of this. He's like, the only thing that convinced me that all of this is real is my wife, who has been visited by an entity that is constantly on top of her when she's in bed. And he said, this is incredible. He said, and so the last time she wasn't even asleep. She's awake, but she's in paralysis. And he asked her, honey, where is he now? And she said, he is hovering directly over me. So this pathology of evolving according to our awareness of it, of stepping into archetypes and roles, it is one of the more profound interconnectivities between demonology and ufology. So one man's incubi entity is succubi entity is another man's abduction. To a point, at least in my research, it got to a degree where it's like, okay, there are too many overlapping characteristics for these phenomena to be completely separate. And that's when I kind of drifted into occult research, and we can get into that. But basically, to answer your question, I believe it's a singular intelligence, and that we've seen it throughout history. It has evolved just as we have. And again, the reason it's evolving is because it wants to evade.
Before we get into some occult stuff, I want to ask you, or share rather, a personal story that Tom, I think, does know about me. And I'm really not okay. I host a conspiracy show, so my mind is open, right?
Right.
But I tend not to believe in ghosts and spirits.
Don't
However, there is two instances in my life that make me question. Before I share the one I want to share with you, that is rather strange, and there's physical evidence on my body. But I wanted to ask you before, what is your feeling when this phenomenon visits you in a dream? Can something leave a physical mark on your body from a
Absolutely.
dream?
Yes. So to answer your question, because I want to hear what you're going to tell me, but yes, absolutely. And there is overwhelming evidence that these are not, in fact, dreams, that whatever they're doing to us is real. But in order to evade our senses and to guide us into cooperation, it's just a nightmare. And then you
Okay.
wake up the next day going, wait a minute, there are
Okay.
physical traces.
So when I was I don't know how old. I want to say maybe I was like 8 or 9 years old. Um I was with my mother. We lived with my grandmother, and we lived upstairs, and it was like a brick bungalow house in Berwyn. Um, so we lived upstairs, and I had this dream. My mom's favorite movie is The Wizard of Oz. Okay. And I had this dream that the Wicked Witch of the West was at the top of the stairs, and I was in the middle going up to her, and my mother was on the landing on the bottom saying, Michael, no, no, no. And I remember it vividly, like she was luring me up, you know, and that's all I remember from it. But then years later, on my back, there's these three, 1, 2, 3 deep scars. Like my mom said one day, I was getting out of the shower. She's like, "What is on your back?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" And she's like, "It looked like scratch." And they like, I could email you a photo of them. It's like they're like three, like deep, and there's three. Um, you can make an argument for a faint fourth, but there's three prominent ones. And it's like, dude, I don't know where they came from, but when you see them, you're going to be like, okay, like there's no way that those could have happened without you knowing how they happened, you know?
Right.
What do you
Right.
think? What do you make of that?
Well, I mean, I've seen that before, and I think the biggest point to make here about this particular case study is that it's reflective of what they're doing with experiencers. Now, that case study is one that you could have put it in the UFO abduction phenomenon, You could put it in early demonology. You could make it a near-death experience, an out-of-body experience, because we truly don't understand what's happening during the dream state. We don't. Now, there is evidence that I've collected, and also Ian Stevenson, where during the dream state, and this is just speculation to a degree, but the physical evidence is there. But for somehow the soul leaves the body, and that they're doing things to the soul that will then manifest through the skin. Case in point. And I say this again because people are going to they follow my research. They're going to say, Nathaniel, you talk about this all the time. I do. Honestly, I do. But it's a fascinating case study. And it demonstrates a pathology that I think is worth considering. Anyways, so this remote viewer's father, the son came to me, but his father was a famous remote viewer, and he was going in and out of his body, meeting his guides. They're all love and light. They're giving him prophecies that he's getting famous for, as well as building wealth. So he would go out of his body, he'd meet them, and he'd go back in, and then he'd call them like, hey, listen, it's a popular politician. Hey, guy, you need to start pulling in this area of the state and not the other one. And so that's how he kind of made his money. Well, one night he said that his father went into a session, and out of nowhere, his father comes stumbling down the stairs. He's incoherent. He's white as a ghost, holding his chest. Well, when they finally got him to the hospital, he had a massive heart attack and nearly died. But as they were ripping his shirt off, from underneath his skin to the surface, there were 3 religious sigils. They were subdermal, moving to the surface. Now, this is where demonology falls short, because they were interreligious, cross-cultural. So I've actually sent photographic evidence of this to various practitioners that I know, because I'm not a practitioner. You guys know that, right? I'm not, but I research it. And so I sent them some photographs. Okay, what is this? They couldn't tell me, because it was some form of liturgy and occult magic that transcended even what we know to exist in this dimension. And yet they were performing it on this man. Now, the relationship between the soul and skin is profound. And I mean, there have been cases within UFO abduction phenomenon where we see the same behavioral pattern, where these people are abducted and they're in there, like it's almost like the astral body or in some kind of other form of consciousness. And they go through the entire experience, not realizing they're out of body. And then when they get back into their body, then they have scoop marks. Then they have physical manifestation. And so what I'm trying to do now is kind of make that connection more sound, because it's not just you, brother. And I think hopefully that'll make you feel better, because that would suck if it was, wouldn't it? You'd be like, wait a minute, it's just me? Heck
Well,
no.
it's funny because I don't think those appeared on my body until I was like, shit, maybe 20, 21 years old, which ironically was after my first heroin overdose, which I was in a coma for 5 days. So as you're saying that, I'm piecing that in my head. I'm like, motherfucker, like,
Oh yeah.
sorry. But yeah,
Oh.
that's, man, I got goosebumps. That shit's crazy.
Well, it's a completely different concept of reality. And this is what grieves me about modern practitioners. It's like, okay, yeah, the rituals that they're giving you, the practitioners themselves are thinking, okay, I'm going to do this, like, Solomonic magic. I'm going to create a circle and all this, and the beings will never be able to get me. And it's like, no, that doesn't work. Now, it works with the archetype, but not with the proto-intelligence. When the true phenomenon manifests, the practitioner realizes very quickly, I have no box to put this in. It's transcending every model I have. And so this is why when I lectured in England, I talked, my lecture was called The Molter as a Species Within. But basically what I was talking about was, because of how many blind spots we as a species have, we're under the impression that we're conjuring them, when it's very possible they're the ones conjuring us. And it's the illusion of control, my friends, where by the time we build the altar, right? It's the same thing with Tim Taylor, right? By the time he goes out in there into the wilderness, okay, sure, you spent 2.5 hours driving, building an altar, blood, sweat, and tears. And then he has the audacity to tell us that he's the one conjuring them. No. So what this means, though, and this, again, it plays into the concept and model of the phenomenon guiding us through a series of methodologies and assumptions, literally allowing us to believe we have control. And then by the time we're in the presence of the phenomenon, it's exactly like the other, the older case studies where the phenomenon takes the mask off. And then now you're making eye contact with something you didn't even know existed. And this is why I believe that it's not just the alien hypothesis we have to throw out, even the modern demonic hypothesis, right? I've actually called the phenomenon leaning into archetypes that are not even historically accurate, that they have been a part of the zeitgeist, literally a belief of pop culture. And yet when it manifests in malevolent hauntings, right? For instance, the number 3, right? How many times have we heard that? Oh, the 3 marks on the wall. That's the Trinity. How do we know that? And so there is this, it's a profound manipulation going on, but this is just another example of evolving in order to evade. Because if it can manifest as a demon, then we don't really understand what it is. Because the demonic it is leaning into is not historically accurate. This is making sense. We're being manipulated.
Dude, that's crazy. I never thought about us being a projection of them.
Oh,
never
yeah,
thought
yeah,
about
yeah.
that.
That makes sense
That's
because think about all the like shamanic practices and cultures and ancient like pagan stuff that would be like, oh, the nature spirits told us to make this drink or whatever. They told us to do this ritual to summon them or to talk to them. But that's exactly like you said, that's kind of those spirits compelling and controlling the person, not the other way around, making it seem like, oh yeah, look at, you're so smart, you figured out how to summon me, and like
oh my God.
buttering them up.
There's behind me, there's a book called Eros and Evil, and in that book, R.E.L. Masters, he talks about an Albigensian anthropologist who was on the trail of a particular potion created by his favorite witch. So he spent, I think it was the better part of a decade, traversing the planet, the world, looking for various ingredients. And finally, he got them all. He fulfilled the rite, put them all together, ingested it. And then when he got where he was going, the entity said, "What are you doing here? What are you doing here?" I got chills now because, again, it's this, and I've talked about it before, but it's not just that we're being seeded with technology. It's almost as if the phenomenon is implanting itself into the tech and then seeding us with itself. And so now we look at this and think, oh my God, right? We're going to be so advanced. And then it's like, but yeah, what caused? Because this is another behavioral pattern that's pervasive. At a certain time of its choosing, it will want something. In the greater portion of that has been blood ritual.
Yep.
To where, for whatever reason, it's not, hey, listen, can I borrow some money from you? Right? Can you go get me a 12-pack of beer? No. Right? It's not even going into, okay, we're from the future. No, it's quite literally retracing the footsteps back to antiquity and saying, hey, listen, this is where I want you to go. This is what I want you to build me. And in response, I'll give you what you want. And but yeah, so all of this in my mind, even demonology and all that it has come to bear, it's centered around, and at least from my perspective now, in overlordship. To where, like, I grew up in the evangelical church. It's like, okay, well, they're all horns and hooves. It's like, okay, well, who's performing these rituals? Because if these practitioners are performing rituals to influence them, and they're performing rituals as well, who's in charge of them? And so it's kind of open, at least my imagination, my mind up to a three-tiered concept of reality, at least with respect to what these entities are.
So do you have idea or opinion on what you think they are then?
I think they're parasites, and I would suggest it's a lot like it's primeval. It's primeval.
Like Sauron
And
from Lord of the Rings.
oh, 100%. 100%. And they're playing by different rules. And so, like I said, they'll give us incantations. Oh, yeah, here's a little bit of a ritual. And so, and the whole ritual itself is okay, I'll perform these rites. And then by the time I'm done, you'll be forced to incarnate. It's like, but that's not true, because they can incarnate anytime they want to. Right?
Yeah.
Then so what's the need for a ritual then? Unless it is essentially to bait people into obedience, it's right to walking the plank out into the murky darkness. And then by the time they get there, they pluck the one. All right, here you go. And so this is, again, I mean, overlords, and of the highest order that have mastered laws about the occult that we're completely ignorant of, even to the degree that even like the interfaces they will manifest as that which is existing beyond the mask, right? The proto-intelligence looking through the archetype, it's following laws we don't know about. And so during this entire paradigm, it's saying things. It's one, okay, I want you to do this, or can you do this with a symbol? Meanwhile, that practitioner is thinking, oh my God, this is the best thing I've ever had. And yet that entity, right? It's almost like it has policies and belief systems that experiencer is clueless of. And we've seen evidence of that in demonology, right? Where like there was one case in the debug phenomenon in 16th century where one entity was looking to haunt a woman, and yet he wanted to copulate with her. And so she was a virgin up until the night she got married, boom, boom, bang, 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 it happens. And then in the middle of the night, that entity comes knocking. And this is another area of my research that I'm going to really dive into in the next, probably the next year. I'm going to be opening up what's called necronetics. It's a combination of necromancy and genetics. But what this entity did was it not only pierced her, I should say, but in the piercing of the body, there was an invasion of consciousness to where there was some kind of device that she said, okay, I felt it, right? It felt like an actual man. You guys can edit this out, by the way, if you have to, because I know it's very dark. But there was a correlation between what she experienced sensually, and then but what was implanted within her was the consciousness of the entity that had performed the assault. And it's incredible because there's, again, this, it leaves us within this paradigm of, okay, is this technology, or is this spiritual, or is this consciousness? And yet, at least these case studies are implying that they're almost the same.
I think you're definitely onto something, that it is all the same. And that's why I asked what you think they are, because so many people will be like, oh, well, it's reptilians, it's demons, it's fallen angels, it's aliens, it's whatever. But I think it's very clear to anyone who's deep into alternative thinking that there's a non-human element influencing our world, right, and controlling it in a very big way.
Whatever. Oh yeah. And so this is so necronetics, for everybody that's going to be listening to this. Again, it's the combination of necromancy and genetics. So if you took the entire field of demonology and all that it's been able to contribute, okay, we're looking at possession cases, incubi, succubi, scarifications, and sometimes even sinistrari, he was a Franciscan priest, had victims that had amulets carved underneath their eyelids. Very sinister, nearly like a serial killer thing. It's very strange. But within all of the demonological lore, there is a singular theme. You have the succubus who comes to the man, harvests the seed. Okay, fine. Then we have the incubus who takes the seed that was harvested. Then he goes to the female. And we talked about those cases earlier, right? All the cognitive interfaces went up. And then it inseminates her. And then so you take those concepts and shelve it. Then you get into modernity. And then we start hearing about the missing fetus syndrome. And so in my research, I thought, has there ever been the missing fetus syndrome back in demonology? And we perhaps missed it. And if we did in fact miss it, is it possible that it's perhaps more demonic than it is alien? And so that's when I kind of retraced the steps. What I realized was that the incubi, the succubi, the missing fetus, possession of pregnancy are all intertwined with a singular ritual of replication, not found in ufology, but found in demonology, specifically in the occult, where the adept, the mage, would go and inseminate a woman and commandeer the body of the fetus as its own biological avatar. And by the way, the actual principles and precepts are identical. Find her when she's sleeping. If she's not asleep, feed her something that will put her to sleep. Induce her into a dreamlike state. Check, check, check. And then the child's born. And this is called the red right in the ultimate black mass. And then and literally the magician says, okay, this is my body. And so then you have the consciousness that's the new biological avatar. Now, that's not me. That's essentially exactly what we have known to be demonology. And so the only connectivity at a certain point in my research, the only thing I didn't have was the correlation between possession and pregnancy. You guys have probably heard me talk about this, right? Maybe, yes.
Yeah.
And so at that point, again, it's just another factor, another piece of the puzzle that makes me think, okay, is this all centered around the occult? And if it is, are those powers manipulating us now to think that, oh my God, they're extraterrestrial? Because in doing that, now they get the benefit of doubt. But anyways, man, I ramble, dude. So please forgive me.
It's good. I can't help if we're gonna bring up the occult.
Yep.
I can't help but bring up Aleister Crowley. What are your feelings on him?
Well, there's a lot of legend surrounding that figure. Was he the wickedest man in the world or the most evil? I mean, he was saying that in jest. People were heaping all kinds of rumors on him. And yet at the end of the day, he was entertaining dark forces that even he had no control over. And in fact, at the very end of his life, some people believe that exactly what we're talking about now, the occult transference, took place between him and his son, because he told everybody, I'm placing my consciousness in him. Shortly after, his son began to suffer delusions and paranoid schizophrenia. But Crowley was, and I understand what he was trying to do. I mean, to a degree, I mean, I've had friends that grew up in church in a very strict religious household. And if they didn't like religion and yet they were still spiritual, a lot of them tended to go into the occult because they still had a desire to know and they believed in something. But with respect to even Crowley, to understand Crowley, you have to understand people like Eliphas Levi. And then you have to go to a Bromwell the Mage. But with respect to Crowley, what we see with his, the Golden Dawn and all of that is essentially bastardized Kabbalistic rites. that were centered on the belief in God, the oneness of God, purity and holiness, specifically problem age. And so some of what he was doing, most of it, was essentially taking those incantations, deconstructing them, reconstructing them, and thinking, okay, they'll play by the same rules. And what really disturbs me the most is, like, some of these incantations, the way they were structured, should have not even worked. Think about that. Okay, according to what Eliphas Levi and Abraham Mime said, none of these incantations should have been in contact with angels. And yet something in the ether responded. And so this gets back to the primordial man and the phenomenon implanting, right? Implanting rituals, implanting incantations into the mind of the practitioner to draw them. And that this is, again, who's conjuring who here? But this is what, and this is some of the research I've been doing as of late. It's like the tulpa, right? We've always believed that the tulpa was a thought form. And so what you have is the individual has a thought in his head, that thought as a form. And so the idea was that from the thought form comes the form of that thought. The problem is the evidence is saying that the tulpa, whatever we want to call that, is not just the thought form, it's the entity forming that thought. And this gets back into antiquity with the primordial man stoking his fire at night, right? Okay, I want you to go carve the name of an unclean spirit into a piece of metal and plant that into a corpse. That is not us. The phenomenon authored the thought. And then when that practitioner goes out and begins to obey and demonstrate, suddenly the phenomenon says, okay, fine. Here I am. So there is this, again, I think a lot of this does start out in the mind. And then by the time the practitioner opens him or herself up to it, the phenomenon has now established itself. And in a way, it's like we're looking on the wrong side of a two-way mirror.
Do you think there are good entities, or pretty much just ones that want to manipulate and use us?
There is something out there. Dr. Carla Turner, she was working with experiencers. Her entire family, including herself, they were all being abducted by extremely sinister forces. And in an act of desperation, she appealed to whatever was out there that was good. Right? Can you just visit me? I need encouragement. They were threatening her and telling her, you are due for an adjustment prior to her getting cancer. So she was going through all of this, and she goes to bed, and it's just like every other night, or at least it seemed like every other abduction. Only this time, this is the craziest thing, she said, I was asleep, but I was also awake. And they had taken her, another intelligence, I guess other beings, took her out of her body. And she said, now I'm sitting in a chair. And she said, the craziest thing about it was I knew that my body was in my bed, but I am in a physical, tangible chair. And I'm touching it like I'm, right? Boom. And she's like, I could feel it with my hands. And she said there was like these group of beings that were in front of her, flanking her on the right and left, almost like what she called like the Supreme Court would. And there was this screen behind them, and it was playing a scene from the Bible. And that was when Jacob and Esau go to their father, Jacob does, and steals, right, the birthright. And they play it over and over and over and over again. They'll pause it. They'll pause it, rewind it, and play it. And she said, I'm there for half an hour, and I'm going like, what is this? You know, Carla, Dr. Turner, you need to see this again. Boom, replay it. And it was the scene where, you know, the guy puts the what's it called? I think it was the camel skin, everything on him. The dad's feeling, oh, okay, I'll give you the birthright. And so finally they asked her, like, what do you see? She says, oh, you know, she explains it, you know, blah, blah, blah. Okay, let's break it down for you. Dr. Turner, there is a species on your planet that wants to steal your birthright. It wants the planet for itself. The way it's going to do it, it's going to appear as love and light. And more importantly, it's going to appear as one of you. It's wanting to steal the planet. And so she said, okay, so you are good, like you are benevolent. And they said, yes, we know what's going on, but we want you to know what's going on. And then it wasn't too long after that that she got cancer and unfortunately died. So do I believe that there are entities out there that are good? I do. But yeah, so I don't know. I mean, obviously I do believe that, but my research has been centered around the darker nuances. But that's where I'm at now, guys.
You have obviously gone on a number of actual on location case studies. So I'm wondering, what is the most frightening encounter or experience that you've ever had? Or if I guess I'm assuming that you've had one. I'm assuming that you've had one. What was like the craziest, most intense one you've ever had?
Okay, so most cases are like you're there for 2.5 hours, you get like a couple of EVPs. This one was strange because it was a murder case and I didn't know it was a murder case. So when I did the cleansing, which I don't do them now because I don't even know what they are yet. So I had to kind of back up a little bit. But yeah, the family had reached out because they were having paranormal activity. And when I got there, I actually saw where they had to cut up the blood or cut up the carpet from the blood. I had no frame of reference. I wasn't reading the newspaper. I had no idea. And so what had happened was two minors, one of the daughters in that family had conspired with a 15-year-old from school. And the 15-year-old was stalking the family. And the husband, when I got there, talked to him, like it was almost like to try to gut him because he had a scar from the top all the way down. And they had stitched him up, but I guess, I don't know how this happened, but I guess the tip of a knife was broken off and they didn't get it out. And so it was really weird. So the 13-year-old was conspiring with the girl she met at school, and this girl was 15. And the father told me when I got there, he goes, Nathaniel, he's like, my wife and I both work second shift. He said, so, we're off work, we're watching movies, at nighttime. And he said, at that point, we were aware our daughter was talking to this girl from school. And he said that we had instructed her, like, we don't want you to hang out with her. We get a bad vibe. There's something different and dark about her. We'd ask you to just leave her alone. He said that wasn't happening. And he said, so the paranormal phenomenon started one night when they were watching TV. And he said, I saw movement out of the corner of my eye. I look out the window. There's that 15-year-old girl staring at them. He said, so we called the police. The police get there. She's long gone. He said, so a few months go by. Our daughter has basically locked herself in the room, won't talk to us. And he said, again, my wife and I got off work. We're downstairs eating food, watching a movie. And he said, my daughter walks downstairs, opens the front door. Now, this, you guys probably, I don't want you guys to get demonetized, but she said that the 15-year-old came in and she had a bandana over her face and stub nose scissors in one hand and a knife in the other. And she was trying to kill everybody. And I said, so, and I'm telling you, I could feel the evil in the room as he's talking. And he goes, okay, he goes, and the main reason I called you over here, Nathaniel, he said, is because when she was stabbing us, there was a male guttural voice coming out of her, talking to us. And he said, we're pretty sure it was possession. So unfortunately, the mother did die. And when I got there, they had like a bunch of the family members there. They were only been cleansing the house. Well, I did the cleansing. And when I was done with the cleansing, it was almost like somebody turned the lights on. It was so bright. I had this on record, on a recording, where the family, they were freaking out, going around and wondering if somebody just turned the lights on because whatever was there left. Now, fast forward a few months later, I'm at a restaurant. Have you guys heard this yet? I hope not.
No, I
Okay.
haven't.
I don't want to be repetitive. I'm at the restaurant, same restaurant, same time, same seat I was when I got the original message to reach out. And there's a woman and her husband are sitting to my left. I'm reading Eros and Evil, Ariel Masters. And I'm looking at her and she keeps peeking around her husband. I'm thinking, okay, she's going to switch seats. And now I'm going to come up with another thing I'm doing. Like I'm reading poetry or something because I didn't want to have that conversation with her. So once we get into the conversation, I'm researching this is what I kind of like lecture all that stuff. She goes, okay. She goes, like, you have any cases? I didn't go into too much detail at all. It's actually less detail than I went with you guys tonight. And by the time I was done, she goes, okay, you're Nathaniel Gillis. And I'm not saying this, people can say, okay, I'm not like, oh, I'm somebody. No, that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm telling you the story because it's kind of freaky. Because I said, well, how do you know that? She goes, because I was the social worker that worked with both minors. She goes, remember the time, and there was a time when they wanted me to go visit the daughter in jail, but the lawyers wouldn't let it. And I was uncomfortable. I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. But apparently what happened is the night I did the cleansing, she got a phone call, the social worker did from the jail. And the little girl was freaking out. She said, because the entity, now this explains things. The entity that had been visiting her at night in her house went to her jail cell and said, I can no longer be here. I no longer have authority. Now, weird. I took that and I talked to a practitioner about that. And I said, like, what is this? Like, can you explain this to me? He said, yes. He's like, I don't know what that was. He said, but it was almost like there was some kind of consent or authority, obviously, that it had over that girl. And then after it did what it wanted to do, it's gone.
So it said, I no longer have authority after the cleansing.
Yes. Very
Wow.
weird. Now, what's even more, I should say that, not more interesting, but the sister to the husband called me. It may have been, it was a little bit before that instance, but it was like 2 or 3 weeks after the cleansing. And there was an atheist there. I think his name was Tommy. And Tommy wants to talk to you, or no, Danny. Danny wants to talk to you. And I'm like, okay. And I'm thinking I'm about to get chewed out or something. And Danny goes, no. He goes, Nathaniel, he goes, since that event, he said he had gotten the phone book and called every preacher and every pastor here in the Dayton area and was like trying to tell them what happened. But I don't know. It's an interesting case study, but I don't know what it means. I know I experienced it. And I guess what stuck out to me the most was it couldn't open its own door. It could. We know that. But for some reason in this instance, it was almost like it had to have permissive will. And so whereas the 13-year-old would never have stabbed anybody, not prone to violence, the 15-year-old would. But the 15-year-old's not on the inside of the house. So it was almost like it was manipulating both.
Wow.
Very strange stuff.
That's nuts. That's absolutely crazy.
Mhm.
What do you got in the works? I know you've authored 2 books. Are you working on a third? Or I know that's probably a monumental task in itself.
Yeah, I want to lean heavily into necronetics because I think that would explain the Nephilim in a different light, where these beings weren't just possessing, but there was pregnancy involved. And so that's when I lecture. I tell people, pregnancy to us is possession to them. Possession to them is pregnancy to us. And so it's a way they self-replicate their species. And so necronetics would be a huge endeavor because I have to collect each case study, and then I'm wanting to do something I haven't done in a while, and that would be in-home investigations but not with the focus on cleansing, right? But as kind of an observer where I say, okay, can you tell me what's going on and collect any and all evidence. Other than that, I'm going to be also adding tulpomancy. We kind of covered it today, but tulpomancy into the fold, because I absolutely believe that some of the archetypes it's stepping into, it's authoring. And it's first coming to us to see if you believe in the image. And if you believe in the image, you have to obey it. And that, my friends, is the cognitive interface. Do you believe I am your husband? Yes. Obey me. Do you believe I am an angel? Absolutely. Okay. Obey me. And then with the obedience, that entity, this intelligence, begins to implement rules. And so I'm after the rules, and I'm after the proto-intelligence, the source.
I got
sorry, buddy, go.
you're good. I was gonna say, got a couple of things. One's kind of a question, one's more of a comment. So the necronetics, what comes to mind with that is like when people say the abductions run in their family or possession or like familial curses, and you mentioned the Nephilim, like the elites that believe that they're descended from these bloodlines, and these bloodlines that, keeps them able to interface with these entities and stuff. And that's pretty much it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And
I think there's definitely a lot of truth in that.
Oh, absolutely. So yeah, necromancy would literally be, okay, I am dispossessing my body, or I mean, this gets back in the legend of the unclean spirit too, right? I'm wandering dry places seeking rest. Why? Because they believed rest was in water. They were underneath, on and on. But yeah, so necromancy would be centered around the self-replication of species. See, within the debug phenomenon, the demonologists realized that the entities were not just impregnating the women, they were possessing them, and that these women were not just pregnant by the intelligence, they were pregnant with it. And that is literally why I'm replicating myself, wherein that entity chooses the host of the parasite. And this is like, okay, we always were taught, especially within ufology, that the host is the wife or the woman, right? The hybrid mother. That's not true. The host is the fetus. Why do we know that? Because it didn't take the hybrid mother when possession was done. It took the fetus. So that is necronetics. And yet what I'm deeply concerned about, brethren, is, and I've done this before, where I've tripped over something that they did not want me to see. And then at the end of the day, I get a knock on the door, or like Dr. Carla Turner, right? So many other researchers, like, okay, you should have seen that. You should have done that. And then, I disappear or something.
The other,
Have you?
sorry, I just got.
No, I'm sorry, I forgot.
The other half is, so you said that you stopped with the cleansings because you don't feel like we fully understand what that is or why it's working. And my question is, like, what kind of cleansing, like what kind of spiritual take on it are you having? Are you like, do you consider yourself a Christian, or was it more like a Catholic exorcism thing? Like, what were you doing?
I do lean on the Christian principles, on morality and whatnot. I don't know that our demonology is complete. I mean, and this is what bugs me the most about the modern field is any and all demonology that's being done. It's all rooted. Okay, this is our grandpa's demons. Like these guys are just still out there in the wilderness. Like, oh crap, is this guy cutting himself? Let's go take him over. And it's like, no. It's deeper than that, and some of their abilities transcend the demonological model. And I'm willing to admit that. And that's why I suggest, right, that these are archetypes. And let me dive deeper into this for a fleeting moment. I said this the other day on Paul St. Clair's show, Truth Proof, where some people say, okay, well, the horns and hooves, yeah, that's a social construct. Correct. but the phenomenon manifested as horns and hooves.
Right.
See what I'm saying? Why? Because if the phenomenon can create physiological constructs, that means that you and I can have a conversation today. And that tomorrow, another me can show up and begin to use revisionist history and say, oh, by the way, when I was talking about necromancy and all that, that's not what I really meant. And then quite literally take out your concept of me and change it. So
Do you believe
what?
like a demon can mimic, like you be in
Oh
your
my God.
house and like, oh wait, was that my mom? And then your mom's downstairs or something like that, like fully manifest in the flesh.
Oh, well, there's one case. This is in Beyond UFOs, the book behind me, where a little girl awakens to the voice of her mother. Come into the hallway. Calls her by name. Come into the hallway. Come to me. Come to me. And she's walking. This is at nighttime, so you can imagine. It's almost something out of Sixth Sense. Like it's freaky. It's weird. She walks out of the hallway. She goes towards the bathroom, looks up. She hears her mother's voice coming out of an entity. And her mother and her father are in the other room, paralyzed, watching it happen. So this gets back to this concept of if it can mimic a parent. For instance, Dr. Carla Turner, she was abducted. During her abduction, one of the entities told her, I am your mother. We could take out that word mother and place angel, ghost, ancestor, guide, and the model still holds true. And so now it's like, okay, I don't care what you want me to call you, right? There has to be a better way to vet you and your agenda. So that's where I'm at.
You do you believe in spirit groups? And if you do you believe that maybe deceased family members or whoever may be in your spirit group can actually protect you from evil spirits per se?
For cases about that, I believe it to a certain degree. The problem is this: there are entities that could possibly be formerly human. We good?
Like,
Yeah, we're good.
like
Okay. I thought something was all right. There's somebody working with them. There's somebody performing these rites. And there are even case studies where people are abducted and they see the dead, to the point where one individual case study, the individual didn't even know the person. And oh yeah, I'm dead. I died today. Still wearing the clothes the individual died in. So, okay, another case study behind me, Beyond UFOs. There's an individual that is a young man. He had a catastrophic car accident. He's pulled out of his body and he meets these entities. These entities tell him, your body is mangled. You do not have the ability, your doctors at least, do not have the ability to save your life. We do. We will fix you up, put you back into your body. You will live on one occasion. What's that? Okay, look, we want you to become our prophet. We want to be able to call upon you at the time of our choosing, at which point you will do, say, and go to where we want you to go to. Next thing the man knows, he wakes up in his body. So the possibility obviously exists that near-death experiences, some of them are real, right? And that there are some good ancestors on the other side, okay? But we also have to entertain the possibility that if they can mimic the living, then they can also mimic the dead. And so Do I believe it? I don't know. I haven't seen evidence, at least to my standard, of that they're on the other side helping us. Me personally, I have. So I'm kind of on the fence. I don't know. You give me questions. I'm like, okay, long story long. And then I work about around it.
No, that's good. That's why you're here, man, because you're the expert. We're just along for the ride. What's they make a lot of movies about like The Exorcist is probably the most famous one. What are your feelings on like The Omen, The Exorcist, and the supposed based on true story kind of demonology
Yeah.
movies?
I get bored with them. I find them the least interesting personally. I'm more attracted to Dark City. That and Tombstone are my favorites. But Dark City is more more horrific than The Exorcist. And here's why. Because it's obviously a mirror of Gnosticism, but in Dark City, there was a parasitic species that had not just invaded host bodies, but that had invaded reality itself. And it was implanting memories, again, archetypes, into the minds of our species. And then, like, for instance, the very end of the movie, the lead character is always looking for Shell Beach. He knows it's there. He's been to Shell Beach. They gave him an image of Shell Beach. He's looking for it, can't find it. Finally, he climbs up the billboard near Shell Beach, and a homeless guy stays up there. He goes, "You looking for Shell Beach?" And the guy goes, "Absolutely." He goes, "Me too." And so the homeless guy has collected thousands of newspapers. Boom, here you go. Shell Beach flooded, right? Shell Beach filled with litter. He goes, "Do you remember going as a kid?" "I remember going." "Right. Where is it?" Didn't exist. The phenomenon had placed the archetype again, in their consciousness, causing them to believe in something that didn't exist. And in that belief, there was the orchestrating of events, the moderating of human behavior. And at the end of the day, it could not even be traced to anything that was real. This is what I'm talking about. When we go into houses and we see 666 and we see allegedly demonic manifestations, right? It's demonic. Okay, is it tied to the historical record? Or is it just like Shell Beach, another archetype that it's leaning into that has no real legitimacy? Facade. So when people say, okay, are we going to be invaded? We already have been. And
sure.
it's not, okay, they're going to be on the lawn of the White House. No. It's the invasion of consciousness and the invasion of reality itself.
You do think that I'm sorry, go.
You go ahead.
You can go. I don't want your mic to cut out.
I was going to say, do you believe the cryptid phenomena is involved here too? Is that just another manifestation of this?
Well, I was talking to a guy earlier about this on Skype. Well, there is no doubt physicality, at least some, to the cryptid phenomenon. But there's also paraphysicality where it's coming in and out of existence. And what we are left with are scarifications of something that was tangible, right? It's in one room and seemingly now it's in another. But whenever I'm asked that question, my mind, because it goes back to this idea that any and all archetypes, it can weaponize. Not just, okay, I'm not just interfacing with you. I'm weaponizing this because with that archetype, there are rules, behavioral patterns that if you believe in that archetype, now, oh, okay, yeah, you're, like I said, the cryptid phenomenon, it's like, okay, Skinwalker Ranch, you have Axelrod, who is from the Pentagon. He's researching the phenomenon there, right? He's observing more than anything. And he feels something, hey, listen, I got to get out of here. On his way home, he gets a phone call from the wife, freaking out why there was a wolf man staring at her through the window. Guys, it weaponized an archetype. Right. And so because my good friend is Paul St. Clair. I think he's the leading cryptid researcher in the world, because I love him to death. Plus, he's really good. So I'm biased, buddy, but he's awesome, man. We always bounce these thoughts back and forth, because it wasn't just the archetype of the Wolfman. All the family, they experienced it. Children, the wife. By the time the husband got there, the next morning, they collected photographic and physical evidence where that entity had claws and physicality enough to scrape bark off of the tree. But then he's gone. Now, this weaponization of archetypes is not just witnessed in the cryptid phenomenon. It's also witnessed in antiquity with ghosts and demons. The other, like, there's one paper I have in front of me by a guy named Victor Doman, and he's talking about the Rephaim in Syria. And it's essentially the same phenomenon, right? You build an altar, the phenomenon incarnates, gives you something in return for worship. Well, the phenomenon had convinced them, this is incredible to me, convinced them that if you don't give us what we want, we will turn into demons and scare you. Instantly, right? You see it now. It's, oh, that's an archetype. Okay, fine. I'm weaponizing it. And so then I was like, all right, is it possible, right, that these practitioners who maybe weren't good enough, they weren't giving good enough worship, or the altar wasn't built to their standards, is it possible that these experiencers were actually witnessing what the phenomenon was telling them, right? Horns and hooves, ghosts, malevolence. And then next thing you know, what are they writing in ritual bowls? Against the same entities. And so what I'm suggesting here again is that it's commandeering entire fields of research in using portions of belief in pop culture to create a mask. And so where I'm at now, and others that I've lectured alongside of, we're at the point now where it's not just allegory, it's not just mythology, it's not just folklore. All of that has been validated by the scientific method. And so now we know. What are they? We have no clue. But they can rearrange timelines. And that's what we're looking at now.
Really interesting. And I think it's getting closer to putting some puzzle pieces together.
Hopefully, man. We'll see, bud. But it's getting interesting.
I just got excuse me, I just got one more question for you.
Mhm.
So there's obviously, so you believe there's a physical component to them, but they can maybe like shift between physical and mental and ethereal, and they can do whatever they want essentially, right? Okay, how, I guess I'm trying to get at is how long do you think they've been here on Earth? Like, did they precede us as human?
Yeah. Well, and I'm still not convinced that these aren't formerly human,
Mm.
because some of the earliest theories regarding the demonic, even with for K.D. Eleazar, which he was one of the elders in Jewish mysticism literature, he said that the demons were malevolent ghosts. That there was, and again, people, especially the evangelical world, I grew up in, oh, they're not ghosts. They're definitely not ghosts. Okay, fine. But let's go down that road for a fleeting moment. That would mean that some of these are mutated consciousness, where others evolve, these mutated, and in their mutation, it's very, and this is not a speculation, very possible they were recruited. It's very possible that the very practitioners we're discussing tonight. I don't know, obviously. I don't know. But I think that there is enough evidence there to say that They didn't originate in the 1940s. They've existed since the dawn of recorded history, or at least since the very first human death.
The Cain and Abel.
Murder. Yeah. So I don't know, guys. I mean, again, with each and every piece of the puzzle, you'd think we get an answer. It's not, it's more questions.
For real.
Yeah, yeah. Unfortunately.
Well, I lied because I have another question, I guess. Where can everybody find more of Nathaniel J. Gillis?
You can go to my Instagram. I'm on Instagram more than I'm on anything else. I have a YouTube account. You guys, there's a playlist. You guys want to go to it that are listening. There's a playlist of all my guest appearances just on YouTube. I think I'm over 100 or so. And so if you guys go like to newest or oldest, depending on how you filter it, you'll see the evolution of my theories as, it started 4 years ago to now. But yeah, it appears at least to be overlords of the highest order.
Where can they find you? What's the at? So I'm going to add you as
At
well.
NJ, or no, Nathaniel Gillis. My bad. Nathaniel Gillis.
Got it.
He's going there right now. Sweet. I love it. I love it, brother. Thank you, man.
He's writing it down, I think, right?
I'm typing it in. Yep.
Oh shit, he's going all the way.
Right.
Man, you got anything else, buddy? Tom?
No, this is a great episode. I'm excited to follow some more of your work. I think you are definitely putting some pieces together. Like I said, there is so much here in our community and ways that we could think about it. And I think yours is kind of really tying a lot of strings together.
Thank you, brother. It's there for a while I was all by myself. All by myself. No. And then, I got connected with some researchers in the UK that are parapsychologists. And I gotta be honest with you, I was there for a while. I'm like, oh my God, like, why am I even doing this? And then when they came with the scientific method and say, hey, listen, this is what we found, I was astonished. It's one thing to have a theory, and then it's another thing to be like, okay, so all of this is kind of real. Like it's legit, like the science. Yeah, it is.
I think we're in
And
a spiritual war and everybody could see it at this point. Not everybody,
absolutely.
but many.
Oh yeah, they're waking up. But thank you guys so much for having me on. I had a blast. It went really fast. I loved it.
Of course, this is a great one.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, man. I'm a big fan of your work. Keep doing what you're
Thank you,
doing
brother.
because, yeah, like Tom said, I really think that you're putting a lot of pieces together, making a lot of sense. So keep going, man.
Well, guys, thank you very much. You guys have a good week. All right.
You too. Take it easy, brother.
You want to just do the post?